I was searching for the perfect mate, the real romance in life. The woman, the myth, the serial killer. Nannie Doss was born Nancy Hazel round about the turn of the 20th century. She died of complications of leukemia in 1965 amid the days of flower power, free love, and the progress of the civil rights movement, and yet 4 years before the Manson family would get up to their evil. It is difficult to find reliable primary sources on Doss's early life, and even on her earlier marriages. Much of what is available is secondhand or cites secondary or unreliable sources, or fails to cite any source at all. Sources often get some details clearly wrong or directly contradict one another as well. We'll try to bring the best information we can while disregarding information we are unable to source at all or are far too unreliable. In the end, though, the story of Nannie Doss will be part fact, part legend, as it is in so many criminal tales. The Giggling Granny is what the press dubbed her, or sometimes the Black Widow, the Jolly Black Widow, Arsenic Nanny, Arsenic Annie, or Lady Bluebeard. She was called the Giggling Granny because of the near constant smile she bore and the disarming, inappropriate giggle she often let out while discussing her crimes. It made many think her insane. She was forced to work her family farm when she was young, her allegedly abusive father not allowing his children to attend school. She was injured when a train stopped suddenly and she struck her head on a metal bar. She blamed her mental state on that accident back when she was young, along with the frequent severe headaches and depression that she also experienced. Despite her strict abusive upbringing that did not see her socialize or leave the farm much, she was married at 16 years old for the first time to a man named Charlie Braggs. She would say she was married off at the insistence of her father. Braggs worked with her at a linen factory, the Linen Thread Company, in Anniston, Alabama. She lived with Braggs and her mother-in-law. It was an unhappy marriage, but it produced 4 daughters. Both partners were unfaithful to one another, and Doss was heavily drinking at the time. In 1923, 2 of the daughters, Zelmer and Gertrude, aged under 1 year and aged nearly 2, both died of suspected food poisoning less than a month apart. Several months to a year later, Braggs took the eldest daughter and fled the marriage, leaving only a newborn and his mother behind. It's unclear when he left, as Florina, the youngest child to survive, was born nearly a year to the day after Zelmer passed in August of 1923. Sources often quote the 4th daughter, Melvina, as being the eldest. However, she was born in 1926 and would have been the last to be born. So she was, in fact, the youngest. Zelmer and Gertrude were the eldest children, and Florina was the middle child. Braggs' mother would die soon after he left, and although there is some speculation, there's no evidence that Doss did anything to harm her mother-in-law. She did go to work in a cotton mill. When Braggs returned a year later, he had another woman with him who herself had a child, and he and Doss divorced. Doss took her 2 surviving daughters back home with her to her mother. Still another year passed, and Doss would remarry. this time to Robert Franklin Harrelson. The family settled in Jacksonville, and it didn't take long for the marriage to turn unhappy. Doss discovered that husband number 2 was an alcoholic with a criminal record. They stayed together for 16 years despite those issues. Doss's daughter Melvina gave birth to 2 children. The first was Robert Lee Haynes in 1943, and the second baby came in 1945, a daughter. Melvina had Ether during this birth, and she was also really exhausted from a long and difficult labor. She thought she saw her mother stick a hat pin into the baby's head. She questioned what she saw, though, because of the exhaustion and the ether. So she talked to her husband and her sister about it. They both told her that Doss told them the baby was dead, but they also noticed her holding a pin. The doctors could not provide an explanation for the death of the baby girl either way. To say this family suffered dysfunction is an understatement. Melvina and her husband, both suffering from grief, separated, and Melvina started dating a soldier, it's said. Doss did not like the man. Well, Melvina took a trip to visit her father, Briggs, and after having a row with her mother, she left young Robert in the care of Doss. Little Robert, just 2 years old, would die under Doss's care. The doctors would diagnose the cause of death as asphyxia, cause unknown. Just 2 months later, Doss collected on a $500 life insurance policy she had taken out on the toddler. That same year, 1945, while the war in Europe was ending and troops were returning home, Doss was allegedly raped by her second husband, who had been partying and celebrating the war's end. The next day, she put rat poison in Harrelson's whiskey jar, and he died that evening. She collected enough life insurance from him to purchase some land and a house near Jacksonville. Marriage number 3 came after a whirlwind romance while Doss was traveling in Lexington, North Carolina. She met Arlie Lanning through a Lonely Hearts column, and the two were married within 3 days of meeting. Lanning was not much better than Harrelson. He was another alcoholic womanizer. Despite this, it was Doss that would be absent from the marriage and the home for months at a time. He would die of suspected heart failure, and despite the poor marriage and her absence, the town was very supportive of Doss at his funeral. Lanning left his house to his sister, and shortly after the funeral, as Doss was leaving, it was burned to ashes. Doss, though, held insurance on the house, which, depending on the source you read, she either collected in her name or the insurance check should have gone to the sister, and she collected it illegally. Lanning's mother then died in her sleep, and Doss left North Carolina. She went to her sister Dovey's house. Dovey was bedridden with illness at that time, but still, it wasn't long after Doss arrived that Dovey died. Doss, alone in the world again, soon took to looking for husband number 4. She joined a dating service called the Diamond Circle Club. Through that service, she met Richard L. Morton from Jamestown, North Carolina. They married in 1952 in Emporia, Kansas. He was not an alcoholic, but he liked women and was an adulterer. Doss's mother, Louisa, came to live with the couple, but like others, she wouldn't last long. She was poisoned and died in February 1953. Morton followed by poison in May 1953. Doss did not let grief slow her down, though. By June of that year, she married Samuel Doss from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Again, that was in June, only a month after the death of her 4th husband. By September, he was sick, and admitted to the hospital with symptoms of the flu. Doctors diagnosed him with a severe digestive tract infection and released him after treatment on October 5th. He was dead by the 12th. Doss took 2 life insurance policies out on him, but his doctor was a little concerned about his sudden demise and ordered an autopsy. The autopsy found large amounts of arsenic in Samuel's system, and so Doss was arrested. Samuel Doss was neither a boozer nor a philanderer. His sin, in the eyes of his wife, was not allowing anything but educational reading and television in the home. After her arrest at age 49, she confessed to killing 4 of her husbands, numbers 2 through 5. Authorities would exhume and find either high arsenic levels or signs of suffocation by smothering in her mother, 2 of her daughters, 2 sisters, her grandson, the mother-in-law, and some sources say a nephew of Lanning's. Despite the findings, she claimed to have never harmed her blood kin. She would begin criminal proceedings in Oklahoma on Samuel's murder only. All of the other deaths occurred in states that were not Oklahoma. After the jury at her sanity hearing found her sane, she entered a guilty plea and was sentenced to life. The death penalty was available, but the judge at her trial spared her the electric chair on the basis of both her mental disabilities and her gender. The judge did not want to have a woman sent to the electric chair. She was never put on trial for the other deaths, which primarily occurred in North Carolina. Though there may be suspicions, and valid ones, that she also killed another mother-in-law and the infant granddaughter, she did not confess to those, nor was she ever charged for those. In response to her crimes, Oklahoma passed the Nannie Doss law. That law requires that a medical examination be conducted for all deaths that occurred without a doctor being present. In a jailhouse interview years after she was convicted for the murder of Samuel, she would smile and deny having poisoned any one of the men.
Mom?
Yes, sir.
May I call you Nannie?
That's right.
Where were you born, Nannie?
I was born in Alabama, Anderson.
Did you have a large family?
I had 4 sisters and a brother.
Were you rich?
No, sir. Farmer.
Did you work in the field?
Yes, sir.
How long?
All my life.
How old were you when you first got married?
16.
And how many times were you married?
5.
Why are you in the penitentiary now?
Oh, the claims I killed my husband.
Which, your last husband?
Yes, sir.
Did they say you killed any more?
Yes,
There's
sir.
your other husband? Which other?
3 of them.
Did you?
No, sir.
How did they say you claimed they you killed her?
They claimed I poisoned them.
But you say you didn't poison them?
I didn't.
The murder of Samuel, she would smile and deny having poisoned any one of the men. She came off as flirty and rather low in intelligence. However, prosecutors described her as shrewd, clever, sharp, calculating, selfish, self-aggrandizing female whose aggressive behavior under frustration releases her hostility toward men, particularly her husbands. This assessment ignores the fact that if she did in fact kill all 12 people she suspected of killing, most of them were actually female. Psychiatrists who examined her believe she actually functioned at a 5 or 6-year-old level, yet she was also described by those same psychiatrists as one of the cleverest criminals they ever examined. So this sort of only adds to the enigma that is Nannie Doss. On her part, while she at least initially confessed to murdering her husbands, she blamed her behavior on that early brain injury. For 27 years, no family member was safe while Doss was around. It was not safe to eat or drink anything if she had an issue with you. She probably did not appreciate the irony years later when interviewed about her life in the Tulsa prison, that her offer to work in the kitchen were consistently, politely declined. Every Saturday, we look at a different serial killer. So if this is the kind of content you're interested in, please subscribe and turn on your notifications. Comment down below which serial killer you'd like to hear about next. Until next Saturday, take care.